In my mother-in-law's toast at my anniversary, she raised her glass to the daughter of a cleaning lady who had successfully married up. My husband choked on laughter and started recording with his phone, but my own mother said 3 words that made my mother-in-law go pale. Alison met Ted at a corporate party for the construction company where she worked as an office manager. He was a representative for a building materials supplier, tall, with dimples and an attentive look in his brown eyes. A spark flew between them when she accidentally spilled champagne on him, and he laughed, saying it was for good luck. Ted's a go-getter. Within a month, he introduced her to his family, his father, a retired colonel, and his mother, Tiffany, a former district library director. Alison remembered her first visit to Ted's parents' house. She was nervous, bought a cake from a pricey bakery, and wore a modest dress with a collar. "So you're a secretary?" Tiffany asked, looking at Alison through her glasses with a chain. "Office manager," Alison corrected, feeling her cheeks flush. "It's the same thing," her future mother-in-law dismissed. "And what do your parents do?" Alison hesitated for a moment. "My mum works in a business centre on the cleaning staff. My dad passed away when I was 14. "On the cleaning staff?" Tiffany repeated, raising her eyebrows. "So she's a janitor." Ted coughed, clearly uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. Alison nodded, lifting her chin slightly. Yes, her mum cleaned floors in offices so she could afford to pay for Alison's education, and Alison had never been ashamed of it. "Interesting," Tiffany said, pushing her cup away. "Ted, you said she comes from a good family." "Mom," he finally interjected, "Alison comes from a wonderful family." But it was too late. From that moment on, Tiffany saw Alison as a gold digger for her son, even though he was just a simple sales manager, not a millionaire. The wedding took place 6 months later. Tiffany insisted on a banquet in a restaurant with columns where half the town would feast. Alison dreamed of an intimate ceremony, but she soon realized that marrying Ted meant accepting his mother as the commander-in-chief of her family life. "You must understand, you're a Stuart now," her mother-in-law said at the wedding, adjusting a pearl necklace. "Our family is well known in this town. We are people of culture." They spent their honeymoon in Cancun at a resort chosen by Tiffany. She even packed a separate suitcase for Ted with medications and instructions on where to eat and what tours to take. The first year of marriage was spent trying to meet expectations. Alison cooked from her mother-in-law's recipes, learned to set the table properly, and endured Tiffany's weekly inspection visits. "You have dust under the TV," she would usually begin, running her finger over the surfaces. "Ted can't live in these conditions. He has allergies." Ted didn't have allergies, but he never stood up to his mother. Then they began planning a baby, month after month, with no results. At first, Tiffany asked delicately. Then she began bringing articles about female infertility and referrals to gynecologists. "Ted's a healthy boy. He's always been strong," she would say, flipping through the family album. "The problem is probably elsewhere." Alison had all the tests, and no pathologies were found. Then it was Ted's turn. He resisted for a long time, but after a year of failed attempts, he agreed. The results were not encouraging. Serious issues with his sperm count, low sperm motility, and low concentration. "It's temporary," Ted dismissed, putting the medical report in his desk drawer. "Stress from work." Tiffany refused to accept the diagnosis. She started calling clinics, demanding they repeat the tests and accusing the labs of incompetence. When the third analysis confirmed the initial diagnosis, she proposed an unexpected solution. "Perhaps you just aren't compatible," she told Alison privately. "Sometimes that happens. Maybe Ted needs another woman to be a father." Alison told Ted about the conversation. He laughed nervously. "Mom's just worried about having a grandchild. Don't pay any attention to her." But Alison saw her husband changing. He became irritable. He often stayed late at work. He avoided intimacy. The problems with conceiving became a heavy burden on their relationship, and Tiffany knew how to use it to drive a wedge between them. As Alison's 30th birthday approached, she decided to use it as an opportunity to reset their relationship. 2 years of marriage filled with gradual distance and silent fights had to be left behind. "I want to have a real party," she told Ted at breakfast. "We'll invite your parents, my friends, and colleagues. We can have it in January." "Whatever you say," he replied, "but you should check with Mom. She might have plans that day." For 3 months, Alison planned her anniversary. She reserved a banquet hall at the Riverview Bistro, which overlooked the river. She created a menu with her favorite dishes. She chose decorations for the tables, compositions of freesias and eustomas. "Is that too expensive?" Ted asked, looking at the budget. "Couldn't we celebrate it in a cafe?" "I'm only turning 30 once," Alison replied firmly. "I'll pay for everything myself with my own money." She had been saving for this party since the beginning of the year, denying herself small luxuries. She wanted a true celebration, bright, without compromises or austerity. Her first milestone birthday as a married woman. At the Galaxy Mall, she found a sea blue dress with an open back and delicate embroidery on the bodice. It fit her slender figure perfectly, accentuating her waist and flowing gently over her hips. "Are you going to wear that?" Ted asked when she showed him the dress. "Isn't it a little revealing?" "It's an elegant evening gown," Alison countered. "It's perfect for a special occasion." "Whatever you say," he replied, not looking up from his phone. A week before the anniversary, Alison invited her mother out for lunch. Rachel arrived right after her shift, tired but with a gift, a pair of silver earrings with aquamarine. "Honey, you didn't have to organize such a big party," her mother said, looking at the photos of the restaurant. "We could have just stayed at home and made soup." "Mum, I want a real party." Alison hugged her shoulders. "You deserve a beautiful night as much as I do." Rachel sighed. "Will Tiffany be there?" "Of course. Ted's parents will be there too. Promise me you'll stay calm, even if she starts with her usual games." "It's not for me," Rachel shook her head. "It's for you. I saw how she treated you last New Year's. She's so arrogant." Alison forced a smile. "Everything will be fine. I'm an adult. I can handle this." The night before the party, Alison was going through the guest list when Ted gave her some news. "By the way, Mum said Dad won't be coming. He has high blood pressure. She'll be coming alone." Alison felt a shiver. Tiffany without her husband was twice as dangerous. No one would hold back her barbs. "Okay," she said. "I hope your dad feels better soon." The morning of the anniversary, Alison went to the salon, hair, makeup, manicure. She wanted to look impeccable. She chose a subtle but elegant makeup look and put her hair in a high bun with a few loose strands. At home, Ted was waiting for her with a bouquet of roses. "Happy birthday," he said, kissing her cheek. "You look great." For a moment, she thought everything would get better, that the anniversary would be a new beginning for their marriage. "Mum called," Ted added, breaking the moment. "She'll arrive directly at the restaurant. She asked for a special menu. She's on a diet," Ted explained. Alison gritted her teeth but nodded. Tiffany always found new ways to get attention by demanding special conditions. "I'll let the manager know," she said, walking to the closet for the dress. Ted sat on the edge of the bed. "Hey, you're not going to talk about our problems with conceiving, are you? It would bother Mum if the guests knew." Alison froze with the dress in her hands. "It would bother your mum, and the fact that she constantly implies that I'm infertile is supposed to be okay with me." "Come on, don't be like that," he frowned. "Alison, today is your party. No scandals." Alison took a deep breath. He was right. Today was her party, and she wouldn't let anyone ruin it. "Okay," she said, smoothing the dress. "Everything will be fine. Can you help me with the zipper?" The clock showed 5:00 p.m. 2 hours remained until the celebration began. Alison put on the earrings her mother had given her, sprayed her wrists with her favorite perfume, and took one last look in the mirror. The 30-year-old woman stared back at her, confident, beautiful, and full of hope. Alison smiled at her reflection. "Everything will be perfect," she promised herself. "This is my day." Ted was waiting in the living room, looking at his watch. "Ready? The cab is downstairs." Alison nodded, and taking her purse, she walked toward the door. On the threshold, she stopped, feeling a strange premonition, as if something important and irreversible was about to happen that night. "Let's go," Ted called to her, and she crossed the threshold toward her anniversary, not knowing that this night would change her whole life. The Riverview Bistro welcomed Alison and Ted with dim light and melodious music. The manager, a slender girl in a sharp suit, led them to the reserved room with panoramic windows overlooking the night river. "Everything is ready as you requested," she said. "The floral arrangements are on the tables, the menu is approved, the musicians will arrive in half an hour." Alison looked around the space. Round tables covered with ivory tablecloths, the glow of candles in crystal candelabras, fresh flowers in low vases so as not to obstruct the view between guests. It was exactly how she had imagined her party. "Perfect," she smiled. "Thank you very much." Ted took out his phone and snapped several photos of the empty room. "I'll send them to Mom," he explained. "She wanted to see how everything was organized." Alison held back a sigh. Even at that moment, Tiffany was present, an invisible force at her side. The first to arrive were Alison's colleagues, a noisy group with balloons and a large gift box. Olivia, her best friend from work, hugged the birthday girl. "God, you look spectacular," she exclaimed, looking at the dress. "You look like a sea goddess." After her colleagues, the other guests began to arrive, classmates with their spouses, distant relatives, and university friends. Alison greeted each one with a sincere smile, showed them to their tables, and thanked them for their good wishes. At 7 o'clock, Rachel arrived. She walked in hesitantly, looking around, clearly uncomfortable among the luxurious decor. She wore a simple dark blue dress, her hair in a neat bun, and minimal makeup. Her face reflected years of hard work. "Mom!" Alison ran to hug her. "You look beautiful." Rachel smiled shyly. "I bought a new dress at the department store. Is it too simple for this place?" "It's perfect," Alison reassured her, taking her arm. "Come, I'll sit you next to me." Her mother took a small box from her purse. "Here, honey, it's not gold, but it's from the heart." Inside was a silver bracelet with a small angel charm. "So it can protect you," Rachel explained. Alison felt a lump in her throat. She knew this gift had cost her mother months of savings. "Thank you, Mum," she whispered as she put on the bracelet. "I'll never take it off." By 8 o'clock, the room was almost full. Only Tiffany was missing, and her absence felt like the calm before the storm. "Where's your mum?" Alison asked Ted as the waiters began serving appetizers. He shrugged. "She said she'd be here any minute. You know how she loves to make a grand entrance." As if in response to his words, the doors opened, and Tiffany walked in. She wore a dark burgundy evening gown embroidered with beads. A large necklace glittered on her neck, and her high hairstyle was crowned with a jeweled hairpin. She stopped at the threshold, letting everyone admire her outfit. "Son!" she exclaimed, opening her arms. Ted immediately jumped up, leaving Alison behind. He ran to his mother, hugged her, kissed her on the cheek, and took her by the arm. "Mom, you look amazing," he said with admiration. "Is that a new dress?" "Yes, especially for this occasion," Tiffany purred. "I wanted to do it justice." As she passed the tables, she greeted acquaintances and those she recognized, ignoring the rest. Her gaze brushed over Rachel, paused for a moment, and then moved on as if she were just another piece of furniture. When she reached Alison, Tiffany barely grazed her cheek with her lips. "Happy birthday, dear. I hope you didn't forget my special menu. I'm on a diet." "Of course, I already arranged it," Alison replied, feeling her muscles tense to maintain her smile. Tiffany went to the table and, without waiting to be offered a seat, chose the chair next to the one reserved for Alison. "Ted, you sit here next to me," she ordered, patting the chair. Ted nodded without looking at his wife and sat between his mother and one of his friends. Alison had to sit on the other side of her mother-in-law, trapped between her and her own mother. Tiffany immediately began inspecting the room with the air of an expert supervisor. She adjusted the tablecloth, moved a glass, and shook her head as she looked at the floral arrangement. "An interesting choice of flowers," she said loudly enough for the neighbouring tables to hear. "In our day, for serious events, we would order orchids." Alison took a deep breath. "I like freesias and eustomas. They're delicate and elegant." "Of course," her mother-in-law replied, "to each their own taste. By the way, the menu here is very expensive. Ted showed me the list. Are you sure you can afford it?" Ted, who was chatting animatedly with a friend, didn't flinch at the comment. "I work and can afford a nice party once a year," Alison answered firmly. Tiffany smiled. "Of course, I'm only worried about your budget. You still have to save for your own place." Alison and Ted had been living in a rented apartment for 2 years, saving money for a down payment on their own home. And Tiffany knew perfectly well that mentioning it was a delicate subject. Fortunately, at that moment, the musicians began to play, and the MC announced the start of the celebration. Alison smiled at him gratefully. He had arrived like a saviour. The waiters served cold appetizers, and the glasses were filled with champagne. The MC, a young man in a suit and bow tie, introduced himself as Patrick and offered the first toast to the birthday girl. "Dear guests, today we are gathered to celebrate the birthday of the wonderful Alison. 30 years is the age when a woman blossoms in all her glory, maintaining her youth and gaining wisdom." The guests applauded, raising their glasses. Alison smiled, feeling her nervousness slowly fade. The night was just beginning, and she could simply enjoy the attention and affection of her friends. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Tiffany meticulously examining the plate with the salad that had been brought to her separately. "Does this have salmon?" she asked the waiter. "I asked for trout. The glycemic index of salmon is too high for my diet." The young waiter exchanged a bewildered look with Alison. "I'll check with the kitchen, Mum," he said. "Please do," Tiffany cut in, pushing the plate away. "And bring me mineral water still, not from a bottle, but from a pitcher with ice and a slice of lemon." Rachel, who had been watching the scene, quietly said to Alison, "Don't mind her, honey. Just enjoy your party." Alison squeezed her mother's hand gratefully. Rachel was her calm refuge, always composed, never causing problems, supporting her without needing words. After the appetizers, the first toasts began. Alison's colleagues gave her a gift certificate for spa treatments and a bouquet of roses. Olivia, speaking on behalf of the office, gave an emotional speech about how wonderful Alison was and how lucky they all were to work with her. Her classmates gave her a set of expensive cosmetics and an album with photos from their school years, which brought a wave of nostalgia to Alison. Ted sat next to his mother, leaning over occasionally to whisper something to her and laugh. He barely looked at his wife, as if her birthday was just an excuse to get together with friends and his mum. When the main course was served, Tiffany took some pills from her purse and ostentatiously placed them next to her plate. "Digestive enzymes," she explained to her table neighbour. "At my age, you have to take care of your health. Although some," she cast a meaningful glance at Alison, "seem to think that at 30 you can eat anything you want." Alison remained silent, enjoying the delicious sea bream fillet. She had no intention of letting her mother-in-law's comments ruin her mood. After the main course, the MC announced a break for dancing. The musicians played a slow tune, and Ted, after an expressive look from his mother, finally remembered his husbandly duties. "Shall we dance?" he asked Alison, extending his hand. They went to the centre of the room. Ted put his hands on her waist, and Alison placed hers on his shoulders. They moved to the rhythm of the music, but there seemed to be an invisible barrier between them. Ted looked up as if his mind was somewhere else. "Are you enjoying the party?" Alison asked, trying to connect. "Yeah, everything's fine," he replied mechanically. "Mum's happy too, though she says the meat is a little dry." Alison pressed her lips together. "And what do you think of the meat?" "It's fine," he shrugged. "I'm not picky, you know." After the dance, Ted quickly returned to the table next to his mother, who immediately began telling him something, gesturing animatedly. Alison stayed on the dance floor, and soon some friends joined her. They danced to lively songs, laughed, and for a while Alison forgot the tension at the table. When she returned to the guests, she saw Rachel sitting alone, watching the party with a gentle smile. Tiffany had moved to the adjacent table where Ted's friends were and was telling them something with animation, casting glances occasionally at Alison and her mother. "Everything okay, Mum?" Alison asked, sitting down next to her. Rachel nodded. "Of course, honey. A wonderful party. You look beautiful today." Alison hugged her mother. "Thanks for coming. I know you're tired after your shift." "Nonsense," Rachel shook her head. "I'd move mountains for you." At that moment, Ted approached. "Alison, Mum wants to give a toast. Come to the table." Alison and her mother returned to the main table. Tiffany was already standing, holding a glass of champagne. She waited for Alison to sit down and, with a gesture, asked the musicians to lower the volume. "Attention, dear guests," she proclaimed in a clear voice. "Today is a special day, an anniversary, and I, as the mother of our birthday girl's husband, want to say a few words." The guests fell silent and turned to her. Ted watched his mother with admiration, preparing his phone to record. Alison tensed. Something in her mother-in-law's voice made her shrink inside. She felt her mother's hand carefully cover hers under the table. Tiffany scanned the silent room and smiled that special smile that Alison had already learned to recognize as a harbinger of trouble. "Life is full of surprises," the mother-in-law began, raising her glass higher. "You never know what twists of fate await you around the corner. Look at my son, from a good, intelligent family with an excellent education, working at a prestigious company, suddenly meets—" She paused, as if searching for words. "Shistoi. A girl from a completely different world, and falls so in love he loses his mind." A slight whisper ran through the room. Alison felt the blood rush to her face. "Alison," Tiffany continued, looking at her intently, "has become part of our family, and today we celebrate her 30th birthday, a milestone. Let's raise a glass to the daughter of a janitor who managed to marry so well." She uttered the last words with a special emphasis, pausing before and after, "the daughter of a janitor." The restaurant fell into absolute silence. Someone coughed into their wine. Another quickly looked down at their plate. The waiters who were serving dessert froze with trays in their hands. Ted didn't look surprised or uncomfortable. On the contrary, he was choking on laughter as he recorded everything with his phone. For him, his wife's reaction to his mother's open humiliation was incredibly funny. Alison felt the dress become unbearably tight. The bracelet her mother gave her weighed on her wrist like it was made of lead. She wanted to disappear, sink into the ground, be anywhere but there, under the fixed gaze of dozens of eyes. Rachel sat very straight. Her hand was still covering her daughter's, but now it was visibly trembling. She looked at Tiffany with an expression Alison had never seen before on her mother's calm, modest face. Tiffany, satisfied with the effect she had created, elegantly drank from her glass and sat down, casting a triumphant look at Alison. "Mom was just kidding," Ted finally spoke, still recording. "She has a peculiar sense of humor, doesn't she, Alison?" But Alison couldn't answer. There was a lump in her throat and she saw red spots before her eyes. She looked at her mother-in-law and her husband, feeling the carefully built house of cards of her family life collapse. Rachel slowly got up from the table. The room was so silent that the creak of the chair legs on the parquet floor could be heard. The elderly woman stood tall and straight, and suddenly it was clear where her daughter had inherited her proud posture and steely character. She looked at Tiffany with a long, penetrating gaze that made her stop smiling. The room held its breath. Everyone felt that something important was about to happen. Even the musicians stopped playing, becoming involuntary witnesses to the drama unfolding. Rachel scanned the guests and finally stopped at Tiffany. Her voice was low but clear in the resonating silence. "Your son is infertile." Rachel's words hung in the air like an unexpected gunshot. Tiffany froze, her mouth agape. The hand holding the glass trembled, and the delicate crystal slipped through her fingers, shattering on the parquet floor. The sound of the broken glass was especially sharp in the deafening silence. Ted stopped recording. The phone fell from his hand, and his face contorted as if in physical pain. The blush that started on his neck quickly spread to his cheeks, up to his hairline. He looked like a person caught naked in the middle of a public square. "What?" Tiffany finally exclaimed, gripping the edge of the table. "What did you say?" Rachel didn't raise her voice, but every word now sounded clear and firm. "I said that your son, Ted, suffers from infertility, and you know it very well. Allison told me you have problems with an heir." Rachel's voice remained just as calm, but in that silence it sounded like a blow. "And it's not her fault. The doctors have explained the cause." Tiffany straightened up sharply, clutching convulsively at her heart. "How dare you? This is outrageous." She looked at her son. "Ted, say something." But Ted remained silent. He looked at his mother-in-law with an expression of absolute horror, aware that the secret he had jealously guarded even from his closest friends was now public knowledge. Olivia, Allison's friend, covered her mouth with her hand. Ted's colleagues looked at each other in confusion. The waiters still in the room stepped aside as if giving personal space to the guests, but it was obvious they were listening to every word. "Do you realize what you just said?" Tiffany's voice trembled. This is slander. My son is perfectly healthy." Rachel just slowly shook her head. "My daughter has been married for 2 years, being humiliated for not having children. 2 years of listening to insinuations about her uselessness. And all the while your son has a serious reproductive disorder, and you know it." Tiffany paled. Her hand, still on her chest, clenched into a fist. "That's not true, my boy." But Ted suddenly stood up, knocking over his chair. "Enough!" he yelled at Allison. "You told her. You promised this would stay between us." Allison watched the scene as if in slow motion. Her mother, her quiet and reserved mother, who never raised her voice, was now standing like a taut wire, tearing down the facade the Stewart family had built for years. "I told Mum," Allison finally spoke, her voice shaky but firm, "because I couldn't bear this lie anymore. Every time your mother insinuated my deficiency, I held back for you. But today she crossed every line." Someone coughed. Paul, a friend of Ted's, looked away uncomfortably. "Maybe we should go," he murmured. "This is personal." "Stay," Allison said with unexpected firmness. "Since Tiffany decided to turn my private life into a public spectacle, let's be consistent." Tiffany slowly collapsed into the chair. Her breathing became labored. "I feel sick. My heart. My pills." Ted ran to his mother, taking a blister pack from her purse. He put a pill under her tongue, holding her chin with trembling fingers. "Mom, don't worry. Everything will be fine. This is just a misunderstanding." He turned to Allison, his face contorted with anger. "Are you happy? You gave my mother a heart attack on her birthday." Allison couldn't answer. "Don't deflect the responsibility, young man." Rachel's voice sounded cold as ice. "Your mother consciously humiliated my daughter. What did she expect in return? Gratitude?" Tiffany, having recovered a little, now looked at Rachel with hatred. "You're just a janitor. How dare you speak to me like that? Who do you think you are?" Rachel stood even taller. "I am a mother," she replied calmly, "and I will not let anyone humiliate my daughter." Ted's gaze shifted from his mother to his wife. "Allison, this is crossing the line. Apologize to my mum right now." Allison froze. Something inside her broke. Everything. 2 years of humiliations, endless attempts to be compliant, hopes for reconciliation. It all collapsed in an instant, but along with the pain came an unexpected feeling of freedom. "Apologize," she repeated, looking him straight in the eyes. "For what, Ted? For my mother telling the truth? Or for having the courage to throw a party that your mother turned into a public execution?" "You're exaggerating," he dismissed. "My mother just made a bad joke. And you revealed our secret. No one was supposed to know. Just us, the doctors. He stopped, looking away toward Rachel. And my mother, too, Alison finished for him. Because I needed support, Ted. Because I couldn't bear it anymore. Your mother insinuating my inadequacy while knowing the truth. Tiffany, a little recovered, stood up, leaning on her son's arm. We're leaving immediately, Ted. Get my purse and my coat. Ted nodded like an obedient child, ready to fulfill his mother's every wish. Wait! Alison stood between them and the door. You're not leaving that easily, not after what happened here. Get out of the way, Tiffany whispered. Your family life is over. I'll send Ted to a lawyer tomorrow. Rachel, who was watching the exchange, said quietly, Don't you think that should be decided by your daughter-in-law? As I recall, a divorce requires both parties' consent. Mom, please, Alison said softly. Let me handle this alone. She turned to her husband. Ted, do you want a divorce? Ted seemed confused. He looked from his mother to his wife, clearly unprepared for such a direct question. Alison, let's not decide this now. It's all so emotional. No, she replied firmly. I want to know now. After 2 years of marriage, after everything I put up with from your mother, after supporting you when we learned your diagnosis, I have the right to know. Do you want a divorce? Tiffany didn't let her son answer. Of course he does. Do you think my son is going to live with a woman who publicly embarrassed our family? I'm not talking to you, Alison cut in, without taking her eyes off her husband. Ted swallowed, lowering his gaze. I need to think. Alison felt as if she had received the exact answer she expected. Fine, think. While you're thinking, you can pack your things and stay at your mother's house. I need space. Tiffany gasped with indignation. What is this? You should be the one to move out. The apartment is rented by Ted. The lease is in my name, Alison calmly countered. And we pay for it half and half, so I have the right to decide who stays. Ted looked bewildered, as if seeing his wife for the first time today. This confident, determined woman was very different from the one who usually gave in during all the arguments with his mother. Alison, maybe we should talk alone, he proposed. No. She shook her head. I think we've already said everything to each other, or rather, everything has been said for us. She looked intently at Tiffany. Tiffany lunged forward, but Ted held her back. Mom, calm down. You have a heart condition. Let her go. She tore her hand away. That girl doesn't dare to speak to me like that. Ted, if you're a man, put her in her place. The guests, who had been silently watching the scene, began to whisper among themselves. Olivia approached Alison and asked in a low voice, Do you want some help? Maybe I should call a cab. Are you okay? Alison squeezed her friend's hand gratefully. This had to happen sooner or later. Tiffany, realizing she was losing control, launched her final attack. Ted, we are leaving right now, and tomorrow you will file for divorce. I will not allow my son to be humiliated. Ted stood looking from his mother to his wife. At that moment, he looked especially pathetic. A confused man, unable to make his own decision. He began, but Tiffany interrupted him. There is no I. We're leaving. She grabbed her son's hand and dragged him toward the exit. Ted cast one last look at Alison. There was confusion, fear, maybe even regret, but he let his mother lead him away. When the door closed behind them, a heavy silence filled the room. 30 people had just witnessed the collapse of a family. Alison stood in the middle of the room, feeling the stares of everyone present. Some compassionate, some curious, some uncomfortable. Rachel came up to her daughter and asked in a low voice, Are you okay? Alison took a deep breath. No, but I will be. She turned to the guests and, to her own surprise, smiled. A little forced, but sincere. I'm sorry for this spectacle. This wasn't how I imagined my anniversary. Alison, we can leave if you want, a friend offered. Maybe you want to be alone. No, Alison replied with determination. I spent 3 months planning this night. I won't let Tiffany steal the celebration from me too. She approached the musicians and asked them to continue playing. Then she addressed the MC. Patrick, please, let's continue with the program. We still haven't cut the cake. The MC, professionally hiding his surprise, nodded. Of course, Alison. Ladies and gentlemen, now for the sweetest part of our evening. The waiters, after receiving the signal, came in with a large cake with lit candles. The musicians began to play Happy Birthday. The guests, a little timid at first, then sang with more confidence. Alison stood in front of the cake, looking at the candle flames. In their flickering light, everything that had happened in these 2 years was reflected. Hopes, disappointments, pain, humiliation, and now the climax. Make a wish, Rachel said softly beside her. Alison closed her eyes. What could she wish for? For Ted to come back, for everything to magically be fixed, for Tiffany to disappear from their lives? No, none of that was right. She opened her eyes, took a deep breath, and blew out the candles with a determined puff. The guests applauded. What did you wish for? Olivia asked when the waiters began to cut the cake. Alison smiled. This time, it was genuine. Freedom. I wished for freedom. Slowly, the atmosphere in the room began to relax. People returned to their tables. They talked more quietly than usual, but without the tension that had set in after Ted and his mother's departure. Alison went around to the guests, thanking them for coming, accepting late congratulations. She did everything mechanically, as if watching herself from the outside. A part of her was still in shock from what had happened, but another part, the one that had been suppressing her true feelings for years, was finally breathing freely. Rachel sat silently at the table, watching her daughter. When Alison returned, she took her hand without saying a word. Mum, Alison said softly, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Rachel replied sweetly. I've been silent for too long, watching you wither in that marriage, but now everyone knows. And what? Rachel shrugged. The truth is always better than a lie, honey. Alison looked intently at her mother, that simple woman who had worked hard her whole life to give her daughter an education, who never complained even when it was difficult, who endured with strength the contempt of people like Tiffany. You're amazing, Alison said in a low voice. I've never seen you so determined. Rachel smiled softly. It was just time. I couldn't stand to see that woman humiliate you anymore, especially when she used my profession as a weapon against you. You're not ashamed of your job, are you? Alison suddenly asked. Never, Rachel replied firmly. I've always been proud that with my own 2 hands, I gave you a decent life. Even if I cleaned floors, you were able to get a higher education and find a good job. That's my greatest victory. Alison hugged her mother tightly, feeling her eyes fill with tears. Thank you for everything. The party continued for about another hour. The guests said warm goodbyes to Alison. In their eyes, she saw compassion, but also respect. She hadn't broken down, she hadn't run away crying, but had maintained her dignity. When the last guest left, Alison was left alone in the empty room with her mother. The waiters were clearing dishes, the musicians were packing up their instruments. Come to my place, Rachel proposed. I don't want you to be alone tonight. Alison shook her head. No, Mum, I'm going home. I have a lot to think about. Are you sure? Rachel asked with concern. What if Ted comes back? He won't, Alison replied with certainty. At least not tonight. Right now he's comforting his mum and listening to how ungrateful I am. Rachel sighed. Still, call me when you get home, no matter what time it is. Alison agreed, hugged her mother goodbye, and called a cab. Sitting in the back seat, watching the night streets pass by the window, she suddenly realized that a new stage in her life was truly beginning today. And even if it wasn't how she had planned it, perhaps it was exactly how it was supposed to be. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, looked at her in the rearview mirror. Celebrating something? You're dressed up very nicely. Alison looked at him in the mirror and smiled. Yes, today I'm celebrating my freedom. He didn't ask any more questions, just nodded as if he understood everything. Alison leaned back in the seat, looking at the starry sky through the cab window, and for the first time in a long time, she felt she could breathe fully. The taxi stopped in front of her apartment building just at midnight. Alison paid the driver and slowly went up the stairs. Her party shoes, which had seemed comfortable in the morning, now cruelly pinched her, and in the cool night air, the beautiful dress felt cold. She took out her keys and paused in front of her apartment door, aware that she didn't know what was waiting for her inside. Had Ted come back? Had he packed his bags? Or maybe he and Tiffany had decided to set a trap for her and continue the scandal at home? She took a deep breath and opened the door. The apartment was dark and quiet. She turned on the light and looked around. Everything looked exactly as she had left it in the afternoon. On the coffee table lay Ted's tingai, which he had tried on before leaving and eventually decided to change. In the sink, there was a cup with half-drunk coffee, the mundane life that now seemed to belong to someone else. Alison took off her shoes, went to the mirror in the hallway, and looked at herself for a long time. Her carefully styled hair was a little messy, her makeup slightly smudged, but there was something new in her eyes. The quiet determination of someone who had let go of a heavy burden. She went into the bedroom, unzipped the dress, letting it fall to the floor, and put on a housecoat. Then she sat on the bed and finally allowed the tears she had held back all night to fall. They were not tears of sadness or resentment, but of emotional exhaustion, as if something inside her, which had been tense for a long time, had finally been released. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating with notifications, messages from friends, colleagues, questions, support, and none from Ted. Alison dialed her mother's number. "Mum, I'm home. Everything's fine." The concern was evident in Rachel's voice. "Yes, Ted isn't here. I think he's sleeping at his mum's house." "Okay." Her mother calmed down a little. "And how are you?" Alison was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "That's what's strange. It's like I'm waking up after a long sleep. You know, I really loved him once." "I know, honey," Rachel replied. 2 years, Mum. 2 years. I tried to conform to their standards, to be a good wife according to Tiffany. And for what? So I could be humiliated at my own anniversary." Rachel sighed. People like her are never satisfied. They always need to put someone down to feel superior. "You know what's most painful?" Alison continued it. "Not that she called me the daughter of a janitor, but that Ted laughed and recorded it on video. He found it funny." "He was always weak," Rachel said softly. "A man who, at 30, can't separate from his mother's apron strings is unlikely to be a reliable husband." Alison smiled sadly. "Why didn't you tell me that before?" "And would you have listened?" her mother asked rightfully. "It's useless to give advice to people in love." They talked for a little longer. Rachel made sure her daughter was okay, and they agreed to meet the next day. After the call, Alison made herself some tea and sat by the window, looking out at the night city. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't rushing anywhere, didn't have to please anyone or take care of someone. The morning brought news. Her phone woke Alison at 8 a.m. It was Olivia. "Ali, have you seen?" her friend asked excitedly. "Seen what?" Alison replied sleepily, opening her eyes with difficulty. "Check Instagram right now." Alison sat up in bed and opened the app. The first thing she saw was a photo from her anniversary taken by one of the guests. In it, Tiffany was holding her glass high with a triumphant smile, giving her toast. The caption read, "Mother-in-law from hell humiliated daughter-in-law at her anniversary by calling her the daughter of a janitor. But the daughter-in-law's mum got revenge with a single sentence." "Oh my God," Alison exhaled. "Who posted this?" "No idea," Olivia replied, "but the post has already gone viral. A ton of reposts and comments. Most of them support you and your mum." Alison read the comments. The mother-in-law got what she deserved. Heroic mum defended her daughter. Typical toxic family with a mama's boy. And hundreds of similar comments. "I'm in shock," Alison murmured. "My personal hell has become public entertainment." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you," Olivia said guiltily. "I just thought you should know." Alison thanked her friend and hung up. She went to the kitchen, put the kettle on without thinking, and opened her phone again, seeing other posts. The story was spreading like a virus. People were discussing it, sharing it, adding details that didn't actually exist. In some versions, Tiffany was already a former party official, and Rachel was a heroic single mother who worked 3 jobs. The phone rang again. This time, Ted's name appeared. Alison looked at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "Yes," she said dryly. "Have you seen what's happening?" Ted got straight to the point. His voice was tense with a hint of panic. "You mean the social media posts? Yes, I just found out." "It's a nightmare," he exclaimed. "Mom's hysterical. Acquaintances are calling her colleagues. Everyone has seen those posts." Alison was silent, waiting for him to continue. "You have to deny it," Ted has demanded. "Write that it was a joke, a misunderstanding, something." Alison laughed without joy. "Deny it? A joke? Ted, your mother publicly humiliated me in front of all the guests. She called me the daughter of a janitor with such contempt, as if it were a mark of shame. And you recorded it with your phone and laughed. What am I supposed to deny?" "But my problems," he exclaimed desperately. "This is personal, Alison. Can you imagine what will happen at work? How will people look at me?" "And how would they look at me, Ted?" she asked in a low voice. "After your mother basically announced to everyone that I married you for convenience, using daughter of a janitor as an insult. Have you thought about that?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "By the way, I didn't post those messages," Alison added, "and I have no idea who did. There were 30 people at the anniversary. Anyone could have." "Mom is in the hospital," Ted said, changing tactics. "Hypertensive crisis. The doctors say it could be a stroke." Alison closed her eyes. She knew this trick. Tiffany always got sick at critical moments to manipulate her son or make her daughter-in-law feel guilty. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. "I hope she gets better." "You have to come," Ted insisted. "Apologize to her. That might calm her down." "No, Ted," Alison replied firmly. "I won't go, and I won't apologize for something I didn't do. I didn't start the scandal at the anniversary, and I didn't post that message on the internet. If you want my opinion, your mother should already have learned that her actions have consequences." "You're just insensitive," Ted snapped. "I thought you loved me." "I did love you," Alison replied in a low voice. "For 2 years, I tried to be part of your family. I endured humiliations, insinuations, condescending attitudes. I supported you when we found out your diagnosis, even though your mother did everything to blame me for your infertility. And what did I get in return? You allowed your mother to publicly humiliate me and recorded everything with your phone. Is that what love is, Ted?" There was a muffled sigh on the other end of the line. He was in shock, not knowing how to react. 2 years, Alison repeated. 2 years of waiting for you to side with me just once, but you always chose your mother. "And now what?" Ted asked in a dull voice after a pause. "I think we should separate," Alison replied calmly. "This marriage was a mistake from the beginning." A pleading tone appeared in his voice. "Because of one single incident, Alison. Let's talk after Mum gets better. I'll come over and we'll talk." "No, Ted, not because of one single incident, but because of 2 years full of those incidents. Yesterday was just the final straw." "You can't just erase everything like that," he exclaimed. "We had good times too." "Yes, we did," Alison admitted, "and I'm grateful for them, but they're not enough for a marriage. Marriage is a partnership. It's about support. It's about respect. We didn't have that." "I love you," Ted said suddenly. Alison closed her eyes. Those words had once made her heart beat faster. Now they sounded empty. "Goodbye, Ted," she said quietly, and hung up. All day, her phone didn't stop ringing and receiving messages. Colleagues, acquaintances, even people Alison hadn't talked to in years were calling. Everyone wanted to know the details of the scandal, to express support, or simply to satisfy their curiosity. In the evening, she turned off the sound and just lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Around 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Alison, newly awakened and not yet having had her coffee, opened it expecting to see Ted. But on the threshold stood Tiffany, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but no longer in hospital clothes, but in her usual formal, serious suit. "Good morning," Alison said coldly, surprised by the visit. "I came to talk," Tiffany replied dryly. Please, come in. Alison silently stepped aside, letting her mother-in-law into the apartment. Rachel came out of the kitchen when she heard the voices and froze when she saw the visitor. "And you're here too," Tiffany noted, pursing her lips. "Even better, the conversation concerns both of you." "Please come into the living room," Alison said, closing the door. "Would you like some tea?" "We don't need pleasantries," Tiffany cut in. "I came on a serious matter." They went into the living room. Tiffany remained standing, refusing to sit. "Because of you," she began, looking at Rachel, "my reputation is ruined. Everyone I know is talking to me. My colleagues from the library are calling to give their condolences. I had to turn off my phone." "Because of you," Rachel calmly countered. "You were the first one to publicly humiliate my daughter." "It was a toast," Tiffany exclaimed. "A common joke." "A joke?" Alison approached her. "Calling me the daughter of a janitor with so much contempt in front of all the guests at my anniversary, as if it were a brand of shame, is a joke?" Tiffany was confused for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. "You misunderstood. I just wanted to highlight the journey you've taken, Alison, from being the daughter of a janitor to an office manager at a respectable company. It was a compliment." "Don't lie," Rachel said softly. "You knew perfectly well what you were doing. I knew it too, and all the guests understood your intention." Tiffany took a deep breath, clearly suppressing her anger. "Fine. I admit I was wrong," she said, "but what you two did is much worse. You revealed my son's personal medical secret." "That," Tiffany began. "It's not a medical secret," Alison countered. "It's a fact of our family life that you used against me, constantly insinuating my infertility, even though you knew the truth." "Ted is depressed," Tiffany continued, changing tactics. "He won't leave his room. He refuses to eat. Do you understand what you've done?" "And do you understand what you did to my daughter for 2 years?" Rachel asked in a low voice. "How it feels to listen to your criticisms, endure humiliations, and see that her husband always chooses his mother's side." Tiffany's gaze shifted from one woman to the other, realizing she wouldn't get any sympathy. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "Money? I'm willing to pay for you to publicly deny all those stories on the internet." Alison laughed bitterly, but without malice. "Money? Do you really think this is about money? I didn't post those messages, and I have no intention of denying anything. The truth is the truth." "Then what was all this for?" Tiffany exclaimed desperately. "Why start this scandal?" "I didn't start it," Alison reminded her. "You did. I just didn't stay silent like I always used to." Tiffany sat down on the edge of the sofa, suddenly without her usual combative air. "What should I do? My son, his career is in danger, all that gossip." "Look," Alison said, sitting in front of her. "I don't wish you or Ted any harm, really. I just want to get a divorce and start a new life without either of you." Tiffany looked up. "You don't love my son?" "I did love him," Alison replied sincerely. "But your constant interference, his inability to protect me, his continuous concessions to you killed my feelings." "Ted's a good boy," Tiffany said in a low voice. "He's just very attached to me." "Too attached," Rachel observed. "A man must learn to separate from his mother when he starts a family." "You don't understand," Tiffany denied. "He was always special, sensitive. After his father died, we became even closer." "His father died 2 years ago," Alison reminded her. "By then, we had already been married for a year." Tiffany didn't answer, staring into Risi. For the first time, Alison didn't see the formidable mother-in-law, but simply an aging woman, terrified of loneliness, and clinging to her son as her only support. "What do you want from us?" Alison asked after a pause. Tiffany gathered her thoughts. "I want you to help stop this flood of garbage on the internet, to publicly state that this was all a misunderstanding." "I can't do that," Alison shook her head. "First, I don't control who writes what on the internet. Second, it wasn't a misunderstanding. You consciously humiliated me and my mother defended me. That's the whole story." "Then at least," Tiffany hesitated, "at least don't make things worse. Don't give interviews, don't publish details." That I can promise, Alison agreed. I don't plan on turning my personal life into a reality show. Tiffany nodded, taking that small promise as a great victory. And about the divorce? I'll file the papers next week, Alison said. I hope it will all be quick and uncomplicated. Are you sure? Tiffany asked with hope. Wouldn't it be better to wait? Let things cool off? Ted is very affected, I'm sure. I am sure, Alison replied firmly. Our marriage was a mistake from the beginning. It's better to acknowledge it now than to keep torturing each other. Tiffany adjusted her jacket and headed for the door. There she stopped and, without turning around, said, You know, I always wanted the best for him. I always did. I know, Alison replied. The problem is that you never considered me to be the best. Tiffany didn't answer anything and left, closing the door carefully. Well, that's that, Alison sighed, sitting down on the sofa. It's not over. Rachel shook her head. It's just the beginning, but you're going to make it. And Alison knew her mother was right. This was just the beginning of a new life, free from toxic relationships, from the constant need to prove her worth, from an unequal marriage with a man incapable of cutting the umbilical cord that bound him to his mother. A week later, she filed for divorce. Ted didn't object, although he tried to meet several times to talk about it. Alison refused, not out of anger, but because she knew that any conversation would turn into manipulation and attempts to make her feel guilty. They had to change apartments, too many memories, too many ghosts of the past. Alison found a small studio near the city centre and decorated it with taste without worrying about others' opinions. The anniversary story gradually faded away, replaced by new scandals and sensations. Sometimes Alison found some mention of that mother-in-law on the internet, but it no longer caused her pain, just a slight smile. The divorce was processed quickly and without unnecessary drama. Tiffany didn't appear at the hearings. Ted was carefully polite and distant. They divided their joint assets, which fortunately were few, and went their separate ways. Amen.